Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of your Bish Therapist podcast. I am your host, Melissa Reich, your Bish therapist, a real-life therapist turned pop culture aficionado, serving clinical interpretations and hot takes on all things pop culture. And today, I am so excited and honored and just like having the best day because we have our beloved Mandy Slutsker.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I am not a clinical anything, so take what I say with a grain of salt.
No, but Mandy, I have to tell you, and we've talked, texted and talked privately, but my listeners love you and they love
so nice.
us together. They really do. Like the amount of DMs I've gotten about, our podcast together. I just did one on your show and the podcast that we do. People just really enjoy you. So I just wanted to let you know that because, you bring something so great because, I'll take care of the clinical part. You still have such like an amazing perspective to offer. What I like about you, and I think other people do too, is you're moderate. You're not one of these people that's like, kill Carl or Lindsay, kill it. It's like,
kill no one, please. This is just television.
Right. Like it's not that serious.
I mean, I know it's their real lives, but to us, it's entertainment, unfortunately or fortunately.
Well, that's right. So it's like people who are picking teams and yelling about that. It's like, no, everybody plays a role and we're just here to chat about it. So, so today, Mandy and I are going to be talking. This is going to be a long one, which people are going to be so excited about because we both like to chat. And number one and number two, we have so much to talk about. Today, we are talking about Summer House. We are talking about Spritzgate. We are
good.
Yeah. We are talking Vanderpump Rules and Schwartz and Joe Gate. And of course, we're talking The Valley, which as a clinician, I could literally write a clinical dissertation about The Valley. And listen, maybe I will one day. Who knows? So let's just get into it. Everybody buckle up because here we go. So let's start talking about Summer House, my dear. And it's interesting because we didn't get to cover Summer House when I was on your pod because there was just so much other stuff on Vanderpump Rules. But what was so interesting, I feel, from the last two episodes of Summer House is a couple of things. So last episode, 2 episodes ago, I should say, we watched Kyle have what I called a king baby temper tantrum.
That seems appropriate terminology.
So there's this clinical concept where, and I really learned it working with addictions, is that people who tend to have kind of a very self-focused, some narcissistic traits and tendencies, they feel, well, it's all about me. It's, victim mentality. Everything should be about me. When something goes wrong, it's the end of the world and it should be the end of the world for everybody else too. So it's not just for men too. There's king baby and queen baby. It works for both. But, I'm really interested in getting your thoughts because on Watch What Happens Live last night, Kyle did say he acknowledged that his behaviors, he called them deplorable, which I was like, oh, well, that's good to see because you're right. They were deplorable, his behaviors towards Amanda. What's your take on their whole Amanda and Kyle, just in general?
I think they have such different values, which I think is the issue. So he is valuing his company, but it's not the company for the company's sake. It's building something so that one day in the future, at some point that he cannot yet point to, him and Amanda and their family will be set for life and not have to worry about anything. I think that's what's in his head. I know because I come from a family where my dad also was an entrepreneur and in his mid-40s started a company from scratch. And there was a lot of my mom took on a lot of extra responsibility in raising us when he was just like for years, just like grinding. And it was all for this goal. But I don't know that my mom was very like Amanda. Like, I don't know that she cared about the same goal or needed the same level of feeling at ease and comforted with
Mhm.
money.
Mhm.
And I don't think it's just money. And for my dad, for those of you who don't know me, he's from the USSR and grew up very without anything, in a very resource scarce and just very scary environment. And so for him, it's almost clinical. Like he cannot ever amass enough, not just
Right.
wealth, but do things to prepare. Right. He's always
Mhm.
buying in bulk. He's always you never know, there's
Yeah.
going to be a shortage. In the beginning
Mhm.
of the pandemic, he was sending toilet paper to everyone.
Oh,
So he
bless
had
him.
enough. He had enough for a whole year.
A whole army.
But and I saw my mom and Amanda were she just wanted to spend time with him, and she knew that this was really important and that one day in the
Right.
future he could take a little bit of a step back. It's
Right.
just they're not in sync about what the overall goal is,
Mhm.
I think. And so when you have this shared vision, then the sacrifices make sense. And I think Amanda's
Right.
these sacrifices don't really make sense to me. The amount of time that you're spending on this
Mhm.
and not spending on building our relationship and creating a foundation for which we can start a family, it
Mhm.
just seems like a mismatch. Not that either of them are wrong. It's
Right.
just, I think she sometimes doesn't hear him and what
Mhm.
his vision is and
Mhm.
why he's doing what he's doing, so that
Mhm.
she then understands it better. But I think he really doesn't understand her and what her needs are, which are not
Mhm.
the same. She doesn't need this level of security of this company. It's for her, she wants security in a relationship and to create a family and to create a
Right.
nice, quiet, calm home.
Mhm.
And I just see it as sort of a mismatch. I don't think it's not going to work out. I think it can work out,
Mhm.
but I think it mainly requires Kyle to understand Amanda. I think she is
Yeah.
very close to understanding him and could better understand him in couples counseling. He did say on Watch What Happens Live that he is in individual counseling. And I'm wondering if Amanda's you need to do that first before we go.
Well, and
Right?
it's such a good point because I have done couples counseling where I have said you both need individual counseling prior to coming together, because sometimes if that foundational work isn't done, it's like pouring water through a colander in couples therapy. It's just, nothing's going to be productive. And I was thrilled to have him say that. But Mandy, I think you're exactly right about your take about them two. Them two. Ew, those two.
Oh, I don't know. I'm certainly not the grammar police.
Well, I know, but I don't know. So I think that, to your point, and I love, one thing I do love about you is that you have such a rich background. Your family has a rich cultural history. And so there's two interesting points here, is that sometimes this is cultural, right? If you are
Mhm.
growing up with scarcity and you don't know if you're going to be able to get toilet paper or whatever it is, there is a mindset there that I get it. Kyle's
Yeah.
is not that, which, I think that Kyle is an example of a lot of cis straight men feel the need to be providers when the women just want a healthy emotional partner. Like, they don't care about, yes, we need money to live, and that's a fallacy that money can't buy happiness. We need money, right? Yes. But I do think that sometimes with the men on the show, Carl and Kyle, is that they're more self-focused on them, and I feel like he's pretending it's about Amanda, but it's more about his ego. And she's like, I just want you to listen to me. I just want you to support me and not throw a king baby tantrum when I'm talking about something that's important to me, right?
Yeah, there were some similarities between what Lindsay has been saying about her relationship and what Kyle says about his relationship, and
Yes.
that both of them seem to think that the majority of the burden of the work of the relationship falls on them, whether it be the
Right.
relationship work or actually doing work. So I'm wondering, who actually is responsible for paying the bills, for I don't know, getting taxes, all the stuff
Yeah.
that's not fun,
Right.
that would go through the cracks if not but for them. And I
Sure.
think they wish it was split up a little differently. I think
Mm-hmm.
Kyle thinks Amanda, doesn't know all of the nitty gritty that he does to keep the operation, both of their household running and of their business running.
Right.
And I think Lindsay naturally, I think both of them are naturally the kind of ones that take the lead. But I think they're a little bit tired and they wish that they had a partner that knew all the stuff and could just sub in.
That's a super interesting point. And again, this is why I love having you on. I didn't even think about that. I fully agree. I think that when you're the type of person in a relationship that you have, you tend to be the, the more dominant person, that doesn't mean you don't have needs. But, of course, Lindsay and Kyle don't appropriately express those needs in a way that is palatable to a partner. For me, Kyle's so interesting because he just really does seem to be so emotionally mature. It's like, even on Watch What Happens Live, which we'll talk about that in a second, he seems to become, in my opinion, he gets upset. He gets his feelings hurt. He becomes emotionally dysregulated, and then he acts out because he doesn't know how to manage those big feelings almost. I don't know if that's how it seems to other people as well.
Maybe. And I think part of the problem is that he's expected to react in real time. So when I get really upset, it's usually over an email. Truly. And I at least have a moment to be like, okay, this is just an email. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm very angry right now. I am not going to respond when I'm angry. I didn't used to do that, right? It took trial and error. Because then you send something and you're like, I could have phrased that very differently and not exactly coming across how I mean to come across, and to take some time. When you're on Watch What Happens Live, you're reacting in real time. When you're being filmed, you have to answer in real time. I think in real relationships, you can say, I hear what you're saying. I don't have a response right now. I want to actually take this and think about it and let me come to you in a day or two. But that's not how it works and where he is. So I think he's being forced to react in real time, which lends itself to these outbursts, right? Which
I agree.
Might have as well if I was forced to react in real time.
Well, and add that to the fact that, Mandy, I'm assuming when you're responding to these emails, you're also not drunk. That's a part of the problem here, that alcohol, listen, I'm not judging people who drink, but it just does nothing good for us. It's, to me, I call it depression in a bottle. It's a nervous system depressant. It is not good for mental health. It's just it's never going to lead to good stuff. That's why so much of reality TV can be amazing, because people are intoxicated, and that's not a mistake, right? Because their walls are down, their guards are down. Reality TV would be boring the way you and I would do it, right? To respond and be like, I need to take 24 business hours to get back to you, because who would want to watch that? No one wants to watch that. But in real life versus reality TV, you're right. There's different expectations. There's different scenarios. So I think that's a super fair point. So let's get into Spritzgate, as I called it. You have some really good information. So I'll lay the groundwork for last night after Summer House. We watched Watch What Happens Live, and Kyle was on there with who else? Who was the guest?
I think it was Paul Scheer.
Thank you. Because I love Paul Scheer, and I was forgetting his name. I think he's so great and so funny. And I always love hearing a celeb's takes on Bravo that you just, that you're like, oh, that's interesting. But there was a question asked about Craig working for what did they call it? A competitor, I guess. And Kyle had a very intense and kind of shady reaction. So his reaction essentially was, at first he tried not to make it a big deal. This is what I saw. He tried not to make it a big deal, and then Andy could tell he was pissed. And because Kyle gets that look in his eye, you can just tell he is raging, but he's trying to put a lid on it. And usually nothing good ever comes from that. But when he was pressed about it, he called Craig a liar. And I was like, Paige is going to eat him up and spit him out. So you have some more information about all of this today. So please share.
So let me be clear. I did not actually listen to the Toast, which is the podcast of, oh my God, is it Girl with No Job and her sister? I don't really follow these people.
Yeah, it's okay.
But so Spritz is really run by Boy with No Job, which is Girl with No Job's husband. His name is Ben. And so he started Spritz, and it's just like a adult beverage, in a can. And my understanding, and I had heard this prior, right? I had heard on Instagram from God knows who that Craig had actually approached Kyle and wanted to be an investor in Loverboy. And Kyle apparently doesn't take investors. And so, he's like, okay, well, I want to set my sights on maybe another type of similar product. And they are friends with, oh my God, Ben and Claudia, I think.
Yeah.
And so Ben has this Spritz, company. And my understanding is that Craig became a spokesperson for it. So he gets paid to, be photographed with it, to, whatever. And I don't know that Loverboy has that. And I think that there is a little bit of judgment towards Kyle in that he is using his friends and castmates to do some of his promo for free. And they don't get they don't get money for it. And so like they're always drinking his product. They're always, promoting his product, but they don't get the same benefits. And I think what Ben set up with Spritz is that when his friends promote his products, he gives them a cut. Now, I think there's a bit of a difference between what Ben is doing with business, and that I think he has his hands in a lot of different things. He's got this very successful podcast. He's got the Spritz company. I think he does other stuff. So for him, this is like one of multiple things he's probably working on. Whereas for Kyle, Loverboy is it. And Loverboy has Spritz, but it also has it has like the teas, it has merch, it has the non-alcoholic, but it seems as though it's like solely Kyle's and that he makes the majority of the decisions and does not take on new investors. So
interesting.
It makes it a little bit harder for friends or others who want to get, buy in. That's not really an option. And so that's why Craig did what he did. Now, Kyle is making it sound as though Craig was not fully honest. And also Ben asked Kyle to have dinner and they like discussed their spritzes and the industry a bit. And I think Kyle felt that like Ben took ideas and then ran with them. Basically, Kyle needs to learn, in my opinion, that like the canned beverage industry was not invented solely by him. And while Loverboy is very successful and it's due especially to like his brain and Amanda's brilliant brain.
Yes. Thank you.
Other people, we live in a capitalist society. If you're an entrepreneur, I'm assuming you believe in the tenets of capitalism, which is like, whoever makes the better product, wins out and gets more revenue and does better. Now, Loverboy is a larger company than this Spritz thing, but I don't know. I guess
not for long.
Well,
the way
to be
we're all
fair,
talking about it,
all of the articles I've seen about Spritz are in relation to Loverboy, so I do think it's giving Loverboy some free promo, in my opinion. But at the same time, like I also think it's so dangerous to have friends in business together unless you have a really smart thing, such as like Craig's like, I want to, have a stake in this. I want to get some equity. I want to be an investor. Oh, and also you can pay me and I will promote your product because I like you and I want to work with you and all of that. I really didn't appreciate Kyle making it seem like, oh, Craig's a known liar. That was like 10 years ago, right? Or 8 years ago or whenever.
Right.
This is not recent. He has not been known to be, lying or even withholding of information.
Right. And so thank you, Mandy, from the news desk, because that is such good information.
I hope I explained it correctly because I am not a business person. So like the terms investors and equity, I'm like, ooh, I I hope I'm like getting it all correct.
Well,
but that was sort of, hopefully other people listening are not like shouting or like, that's the wrong term.
I don't think my listeners give a hoot about that. I think they're just like, they just hear, they're not interested in that.
This is my like layman's like interpretation of the like what went down. And I think it's also personality too. I think Ben, who I literally have only heard on one podcast ever, it seems like someone who maybe just doesn't take things as seriously and then I don't know him at all, right? But that's just my take. Like he just kind of, I don't know. It's not as serious. And Kyle takes everything like very seriously and very personally.
And this is where I'm going to bring back the king baby stuff, right? Because hearing that Craig approached him about a role in Loverboy and he was like, nah, you give up your right to call him a liar and be angry with him. And by the way, he's not a liar, so that's just not cool. But sometimes what I get irritated about, Kyle doesn't understand how he is the architect of his own demise. He does not get it. And it's like, you are using your friends for like free whatever. And if you don't want to pay someone to do that, then fine. But don't be mad when someone approaches you and then they find something else and go elsewhere. I just think you can't, it's one of those things you can't have it both ways. And that's the king baby stuff where it's like, it has to be all about what Kyle wants, when he wants it, from who he wants it. And that's just not life.
On the timeline that he wants, he's just, it all has to go his way, which is actually, I find him and Lindsay quite similar in many ways. And he seems to think that he's very different from Lindsay, but I think he has a lot of the same kind of qualities and good and bad, right?
Can I give you my hot takes on that? I fully agree. And so I see this all the time throughout my career is where someone will be so angry. Like Kyle really dislikes Lindsay, right? But in my opinion, they are very similar in a lot of ways. And he's projecting what he doesn't like about himself when he sees Lindsay's behavior. I think Lindsay is a mirror for him, right? That reflects his behavior. And from the outside, yeah, it's like, ew, I don't like that. But then it's like, bro, this is you. It's you we're talking about. So I definitely think that's accurate. And further, to kind of roll this into, Kyle and Carl's conversation, the deal that he was offering Carl, I was like, I know very little about business, but I know this is terrible.
It sounded like lowballing.
Yes.
And I think, it's one thing. It's like, how do you react to something in real time? Like again, I would want to see something in writing and react to it in writing. But what I think Kyle was hoping for was that this wouldn't be, and this is a very generous interpretation of Kyle, that this isn't like a full-time gig for Carl and that it's sort of something that he can pick and choose how much to do and how much to engage. And it's sort of like dipping your toe back in rather than like cannonballing back into the company. And I have a feeling that things have changed in terms of like how they operate since then. I think they wanted just to like see, is this something that's going to work for us? And then maybe build on it. But I also can see Kyle not paying people what they're worth.
Exactly. And that's my problem, because if you're my friend and I have a company and I'm asking you to consult, I'm going to treat that friend, for me, right? These are my values, with such probably over generosity, because that's my personality. And so I do think that there is this kind of like, I'm going to use the term this miserly perspective.
I have no idea what that term means.
Okay. So
I was like, yeah, sounds great, Melissa.
Okay. So miserly is just like this attitude around money where it's like hoarding. So kind of what you explained about your dad, but he's not miserly because it's like a cultural thing. So if it's not cultural and there's no real like socioeconomic reasons or whatever, miserly is just a term to describe sometimes how people, their attitudes towards money and how they make that their higher power, and I just feel that Kyle doesn't, he's not, I guess to me, he just doesn't have generosity of spirit, whether it's with money. or support, I don't know. I just think.
I think he does sometimes. I think I can't imagine what it's like having a for-profit business where you're always thinking about the bottom line. And I think that's where it comes in. Had he been someone who likes to wear a lot of really fashionable things and like kind of spend a lot of money and needs more money in order to like keep up with his lifestyle, I would agree more with that. I think it's
Yeah.
much more of like he's just like a cutthroat CEO.
Mm.
And the system doesn't necessarily reward people for paying, you know, people what they're worth and all of that. I
Yeah.
don't really know, but I think in general, the way that he approaches friends and business doesn't seem to be appreciated by a number of friends that have gone into business with him. And it seems as though maybe this other guy from the Toast or the Boy with No Job, maybe that was like a better fit for Craig.
Right. And I think so. Before we move on to Lindsay and Carl, one thing I want to say is you brought up an excellent point about boundaries. When we're working with friends, it's very easy to have those boundaries be very muddied. And, listen, you're right. I have no idea what it's like to run a business. So I'm sure it is challenging. But at the same time, I feel like what led Lindsay to be frustrated, and myself too, it's like Kyle and Carl keep having these vague conversations. They're not putting things down in writing. They're not like, just sitting down at a table and saying, okay, let's iron this out or let's really talk about it. It's like casually while they're getting ready for a party. And it's like, I don't know a lot about business, but I'm pretty sure that's not the best way to do it.
I don't think that's how they would have done it if it was not for filming and this
Yeah,
wasn't a
and that's
storyline.
fair,
Yeah.
right? And that's totally fair. But so afterwards, I every week, and it's so funny, I see these memes on Instagram about how like every week people are like, I don't know whose team to be on, Lindsay or Carl, because each week it's like you see her acting wild and then him and then her, and it's just like this flip-flop. And so you and I are firmly team everybody plays a role. But what I wanted to get your thoughts on that I found really interesting is that Lindsay is sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And I think for me, her tone, personally, I would say that tone would never work for me. Never. It like in line at the grocery store, I'd be like, you better check that. Okay. So, because people don't know this, but I can be spicy. So I think that that's problematic. But at the same time, I do feel that Carl is on this hamster wheel. And again, we don't know, is it just because it's they're filming, but it's like he keeps saying, well, I need, and then not doing that. And I did find myself frustrated with some of his explanations to her about like their conversation they just had, and he couldn't give any details. And I'm like, okay, I would want my spouse, if they're thinking about having a new job, like part of that is we need to know the financial details. That's just part of it. So I saw both sides of it. What did you think?
I see both sides as well. I think, there's a lot of very valid questions she had. I think how she frames the questions is not how I would like to receive them, right?
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
so.
Yeah.
It's sort of like if you're like, this sounds like a really amazing opportunity. I'm so excited for you. I still have some questions. Is there, a time that we could sit down and kind of hammer out some of the details so I can know
Right.
what's in your head and what you're coming to him with?
Right.
So it's, we're talking about not just an idea, but some specifics.
Right.
But that's just not her style. And I think it's a little bit unfair for him to expect her to change her style just because they got together and because he wants something else.
Right.
Both of them want different things for each other. It's almost like, oh, we got together and now Carl's going to figure out he's always had issues with his career and job. Why would that change now? And Lindsay has always had kind of a harsh way of sharing information. Why would that change as well? So it's a little bit unfair, I think, for Lindsay to expect Carl, she's treating him not like a partner, but like almost like an employee. Like, you have to give me a business plan by the end of summer. And and I think he resents it. And then so he, behaves, he acts out and then acts as if she's the only one acting out. And it's not true.
Right. Right.
He's just, I mean, the true thing is that they both have an income from the show and they
Of
both
course.
do influencer work. They have enough money. I think she wants to have more so that she can feel confident in bringing a child into this world. I don't think that's where his head's at. And so I just think it's just like a mismatch. At the same time, I do think her biggest mistake was not seriously considering what it means to be in a relationship with someone who is sober.
Yep.
I have not been in a relationship with someone who is sober. However, I would at least look into it knowing what a big deal it is. It's not just something you don't do. Like, I don't drink. It's like a lifestyle. It's an entire, like, it's a way of life. And so, and if you have an addiction, joining Al-Anon, if you know someone, if you're very close to someone, can be very helpful to try and understand. And I don't think that she did her kind of due diligence. And not only that, she was combative with him. I think she resents that he gets props for being sober when I think in her mind, she doesn't think he is because he still smokes pot sometimes.
Yeah.
And so, but rather than addressing that with him, she is like jabbing him on the side, calling him Cocaine Carl, asking whether or not he's on something, trying to undercut this very real success he does have. And so that's where I really fault her in this. And most of that was seen in the first half of the season. Now, the second half of the season, we're seeing Carl really mess up, right? He is unable to articulate. I mean, he says softness. And if you watch the after show, which I did very early this morning, he says that Lindsay told him that, telling a woman to be soft is offensive and derogatory. And it's kind of similar to telling a guy to like man up and be hard. And I think that's how she takes it. And that's very valid. I think she's like, I've been a woman in the workplace, in the business world, and I've had to deal with so much more shit. You are like dilly-dallying through life and business, and you're kind of being treated with kid gloves, whereas I had to like scrape and claw for everything I got for my business. So I see why I think there's things that she resents. And I think then there's things he resents where he's just like, I want you to like treat me like how my mom treats me. And that's just like, I think some of the expectations are valid. Like, hey, if you could just like have a kinder tone with me, the way that you say it, not what you're saying, that's valid. But to expect like her just to be cheering him on when he hasn't really done anything.
Right. And essentially, I fully agree. And what I wrote here is that to me, the crux of the problem is that Lindsay and Carl both have needs that they aren't equipped to meet for the other person.
Yeah, that's it.
They're completely like, this is the situation where love is not enough. You cannot go into a relationship with someone. There can be love there, but you can just fundamentally not get along. What Carl needs, here was my take on it. I think the word soft triggers Lindsay so much because my belief is that Carl is very conflict avoidant, in my opinion, and very passive aggressive, and they both are. But so, for example, Carl leaving without her bags, that was passive aggressive due to they both have resentment, and then they both do these jabs, and it's like, and then meanwhile they're just both bleeding to death, and it's like, how is this is not sustainable? But I believe that Lindsay is starting to understand this episode that Carl wants something that isn't her. She and he both know what you're asking for isn't me. So if you don't want me, you need to tell me that, because he's telling everybody else that, but he isn't telling Lindsay, and that is not fair.
It is not.
Okay. So
can we talk about Jesse Solomon?
Yes, please. My little love bug. I adore him. I did DM him. I was disappointed I didn't hear back, but I get it. He's like blown up, but I just love him so much.
Yeah. Also, maybe he's like me and doesn't see DMs if they're like, sometimes they go into like a request tab and I like don't know that. And then I find them meters.
Years
And
later.
I'm like, sorry about that. I've gotten really, since that happened, I've learned to check that tab.
Right,
But
right.
yeah, it's not easy. I really appreciate how open he was with us
Me too.
and how vulnerable, and that he cried, and
Mm-hmm.
he was like, oh, I'm being so whatever. And that I love how every single person validated, like, no, you can
Yes.
cry. You
Yep.
can show your emotions. It doesn't make you weak. You are strong. You are,
That's right.
all of this stuff. And
Right.
when he sang that song,
Uh,
I'm
he's still my
obsessed.
heart.
It's in my
Obsessed.
head. I've been singing it all morning. I'm like, what would Jesse Solomon do? At the end of the day, he's just a big Jew. That was my favorite line.
Love it.
Because whenever there's a Jew on Bravo, I'm like, oh, please don't embarrass us
Right.
as a people.
Yes. Represent very well. And boy, did he. My
Like
goodness.
PK, like
Oh.
it's like, oh, why does PK have to be the face of us? You know what I mean? Like there's I'm joking, but
I'm not. That guy's wild. He's not a good representation, but yes, yeah.
like I think Jesse Solomon has a lot of improvement he can make to how he dates and being intentional with it. He seems to be a little bit carefree with women's feelings, potentially. We don't know. We haven't seen the other side.
No.
We only see his side, but he seems to be a very good friend and a good family member. And that
Yes.
says a lot about someone. And so it was just
I
wonderful to
agree.
see everyone come together. I love seeing West be such a good friend to Jesse. I think West is so
Agreed.
comfortable in the role of friend. I think he's
Right.
very uncomfortable in the role of partner.
Oh,
And
for
we're
sure.
watching him like wrestle with that. I really hope he can get to a point where he can see a partner as like just a really good friend. Right. That he
Right.
shows up for and does all the things that he does for Jesse, being there, answering the
Right.
phone at a tough time, giving compassion. And then you add in sex. Like it
Yeah,
shouldn't be that
there doesn't need to
hard.
be such a delineation.
Yeah.
Like my husband and I, we're legit friends. Like we
Yeah.
hang out, we have, but it's like, you're right. I think West, and I wonder if it's because they're young. And men do take a little bit longer
They
to
do.
mature.
They're not that young.
Well, okay, fair. Well, they're younger than me, so I'm like, well, okay, they're young.
They're younger than me, but yeah, I'm just kind of like, come on, like Wes,
Yeah.
like you've witnessed also, especially people who've witnessed a healthy marriage at home, like with parents. You're like, what are you so scared of?
Right.
Like, it doesn't that look great? Not great. I mean, like my parents definitely fought, but like it didn't seem terrible. Like it didn't seem like that lifestyle would be. Again, I'm also not married, so maybe I should.
Well, you just haven't found the right person.
But I'm certainly not afraid of it.
No, and you're going to make a wonderful partner. But the one thing I loved about Jesse, and I did comment on his page, so everyone knows I'm a 2-time cancer survivor, and what I love is that not only did he draw awareness to it, but he drew an awareness about the roller coaster of cancer survivorship, which does not get talked about. And honestly, whenever I talk about it or post things about it on my page, I lose tons of followers, like in mass. It's wild.
Oh.
It's a topic that people are so strange about. And so for me, that just means we just need to talk about it more. Because imagine all of the people who, so many people have cancer or have had cancer, whatever, and are relating to this story. I've had cancerversary parties and, all those things. And I just love that he drew awareness to it, but it also, to your point, it reminded us why we love Summer House. They're just the best group of people. They genuinely love each other, support each other. I literally cried during that scene, and I'm not much of a crier, but I think Summer House gives us what a lot of the other shows don't, especially Jersey, which is like the cast, they're legitimately supportive and cheerleaders and just like, love each other. And I just thought that was really special to watch.
It was, especially since the cast hasn't always been that way. Like, even if you look at last year's reunion, the animosity that Paige had for Lindsay and Carl, it felt really nasty. It's like, why is it so bad? But it's amazing where they've gotten.
Oh, absolutely, positively.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting how, they're a good example. Lindsay and Carl can't do this, but of how to repair relationships, right? Because before we move on, the last thing, I want to say is that I think sometimes going into relationships, we have very different expectations and different styles. And if you have an argument and you're able to repair it in a healthy way, that's how relationships grow and thrive. And I think that Paige is a really good person. And listen, Lindsay participated in it too, but I think Paige is that person who it's like she can do that with people and move forward. And it's not like a Teresa who will hold a grudge for 750 years and, talk about it every episode. It's like no one wants to see that anymore.
Yeah.
So, okay. So let us move on to Vanderpump Rules.
Da, da, da.
Dun, dun, dun. Okay. So what I'm going to start with is that we also have some behind the scenes stuff going on with VPR as well, which is that Schwartz recently went on a podcast to talk about some of the things that Joe did that led him to take a step back. So, and of course, Mandy on the news desk, she has some of the info. So please share that.
Only because I was coming on this, I never know what's going on because I am not on Instagram a lot. Right. I mean, I try to check it every day. It's just not. Mandy,
you're better off because it is a blood-soaked nightmare. By the way, can I tell you really quickly? This is just a side note. I posted something about her. They posted about their sandwich shop opening, and some guy said, some idiot was like, something about they're not curing cancer and who cares? And I responded with, well, I have cancer and I'm super excited, and I just did a little shrug emoji. And you would not believe the amount of hate that I got for people were like, you're weaponizing your cancer. And I'm like, what? So I'm just saying, back to the convo about how people are so weird about it. It's just
people
so
are
strange.
Crazy online. No, people just don't know how to
They
behave.
have no idea. No.
So what's interesting is Schwartz went on Brittany and Jax's podcast, and I only again heard a clip, just a clip. I did not listen to it in full, so I could be missing a lot of stuff. But Schwartz has been dropping hints over the last couple months that there were big things that happened that caused him to pull away from Joe. And because Schwartz is the most conflict avoidant person I think we've ever seen on Bravo,
literally,
he didn't tell her any of this, right? He just started to pull away and she got super confused. So one of these things was he realized that she is a compulsive liar and she lies about things that don't even matter. And she does it very frequently, which I could have told you just by watching her.
Well, of course, she can't keep her story straight.
Right. Yeah. None of it makes sense. So this was something is he was talking to her about the difficulties of reality TV and sometimes how you can come across on TV. They made the way they edit it and show it maybe different than how it really happened or how you were intending to come across. And she said, I'm not worried about that because I've babysat the executive producer's kids. So he would be nice to me kind of a thing. Turns out she had never met the executive producer.
Oh, snap.
So that that's not something that can be a misunderstanding.
No,
who babysits your children.
Yeah, that's a concerning.
And ever since Katie said that Joe was Kristen's crazy friend, and don't want to, use the term crazy and all that.
Yeah,
I knew what she meant. I knew she meant it was someone who was a little borderline, a little
unstable,
clingy and unstable, and that makes you feel unsafe. That's the thing, is it makes you feel unsafe when you're around someone like that. The next thing is that Brittany also said that Joe just lied about her and said that I guess her and Kristen had not been on speaking terms, and then Kristen's dog died. And she says, well, I found out because Jackson Brittany called me to tell me that Kristen's dog died. And Brittany says, I don't have Joe's number. I never called her to tell her that.
That's
wild. So I think she makes up things in her head too. And then the final thing, and this is what I was watching with my friend Jody the part 2 reunion, and she's like, what do you really think happened between Joe and Schwartz? I said, I bet it was family related, because he has only brought, I think, 3 people ever to meet his family that have been a part of the show. One was Katie, 2 was Sandoval, and 3 was Joe. And allegedly, she called his family and was saying really messed up things. She became friends with his sister, and his sister was like, oh, I really love her. And then his sister and Joe spent 2 nights together. And the sister said, that was the worst 2 days of my life. Had to block her after, apologized to Schwartz for trying to like push the relationship, and said, I'm sorry, I don't think I realized.
Oh, gosh.
And that says a lot of people's reactions to Joe. Now, does it mean she should have been treated the way she was treated? No, I think he absolutely was treating her like a girlfriend and not calling it that and confusing her.
Of course.
And
because
you know,
he is, like you said, he's the most avoidant human we have ever seen on Bravo, 1,000%. Like, he does not understand how to even assert a basic need. And so, if I'm being honest, what you're saying about Joe, which by the way, I get vibes, you know, she doesn't pass my vibe check, but it makes sense if you're thinking about why the two of them may have been attracted to each other, right? And wow, yeah, I'm mind blown.
Yeah, so it was interesting to see the entire cast of Vanderpump Rules on the same side against Schwartz, except for Sandoval. Like, every single person was like, Schwartz, you still can't even talk about what it was with Joe. And, you know, and he just kept being like, it's not what it was. It's not what it was. It's not what it was like. And she's like, no, it is. It's so easy for you to talk about your girlfriend now, but you could never talk about me. I was a secret for a year. And so I'm sure that makes her feel really crappy, and no one should deserve to feel that way.
No, and listen, right. 2 things can be true. Her behaviors can be, you know, inappropriate and boundaryless, which that's the impression that I get, especially from things I see on social media. But at the same time, Schwartz should have been honest with her. And honestly, I feel like this is a lesson for Schwartz in that we can't, if we're in a relationship with someone who we're seeing these really concerning behaviors and we're just staying in it because we're afraid to confront it, like that's a Schwartz problem that he is going to need to fix no matter what. So yes, it wasn't fair to Joe. It wasn't kind. He needs to work on it. But I definitely, just when I hear her speak, I just have intuition. I mean, and you have it too, right? Like, you don't need to be a therapist to have intuition that she is.
I could have told you that she would have said if her celebrity crush was Aaron Rodgers. I could have told you that. Like, that's the energy she gives off, right? Like, that's it. That tells you all you need to know about her. Like, case closed.
Literally does. And
like,
Andy's
that's
face,
insane. His
when
face,
she
and then
said that.
So I watched the extended version on Peacock, and I heard, and maybe I missed it in the first version, that Ariana was like, he's a crazy conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
Like he's, which we all know, right? But like, obviously, that's who Joe would be into.
And you're so right. That's such a good bit of information. That is so clinically indicative. That is that. I am not joking, dude. That is of all the celebrities, that's your guy. That's your dude, Aaron fucking Rodgers. Come on, man. And I just love the reactions, and everyone's like, okay, Joe, it's time to go. Bye-bye.
Literally. I also felt bad that she kept on talking when it wasn't segments about her, like when it was about Allie and James. And it just felt like, can you like stop, be quiet, please?
Well, it speaks to, no, for real, it speaks to the lack of boundary because, listen, sometimes you and I, or people, we get excited and maybe there's crossover, but there's a general sense of social etiquette. And Joe really seemed to miss that. She missed the fact that, like, stay in your lane. it's not your turn. Like, she was talking at odd times. And the other thing I noticed, she was like talking mid-sentence of people. So people were in a sentence and then she would talk. And so it does tell me a lot about her lack of boundaries and her communication style and things like that, for sure.
Speaking of boundaries.
Yes,
I
speaking.
very much appreciated what Ariana was saying because it explained to me what I needed to know about her boundaries. So I'm someone who understands them, but does not, but feels like it's kind of mean to put her friends in a certain spot, that if they are around him, that she's going to cut off those friends. That does feel like an ultimatum to me, even though it's not being said as an ultimatum.
Right.
When she said, you don't have to understand, you just have to respect, I was like, okay, if someone tells you what their boundary is and they're like,
Right.
this is it for me, like this is
Right.
what I need to do right now, you don't need to like ask so many questions because it's not really, you don't like need to understand it. It's
Right.
just like,
Right.
I don't know. If you look at like the whole, I hate to like use this as a comparison, but like all like rights for LGBTQIA people, like I don't need to be gay. I don't need to be queer. I don't need to be trans.
Right.
I don't need to understand any of it. I don't need to understand it to just respect how people want to be treated, what names they want to be called.
Correct.
Like,
yes.
Like you just, you don't need to understand. And that really hit. And I was like, oh, I get what she's saying. And then Lala kept on being like, but I don't understand it. And she's like, but you don't have to. And then she's like, you could never understand me because mine involved a child. And no one that's ever been in this situation. And I do think Lala's situation is worse than Ariana's. Like I've said that. It's you can't get away from your ex when you share custody of a child. And even after that, like if their kid ever gets married and has a relationship with Randall, like they're both going to be at the wedding. Like do you know what I'm saying? Like she's never going to get away, and Ariana has the opportunity to get away. So but we don't need to compare.
Yeah.
Like,
so
you know what I mean?
Comparison, that's where Lala lost me. But the first thing I want to say is that yes, with Ariana's, her statement about boundaries, I swear I was like clapping when I heard her say that, because here is what I feel, that like in real life versus a reality show, Ariana should have boundaries. She can have them. And the good thing, well, the thing about boundaries that is hard for people and upsets them, and like you said, sometimes it's hard to understand, is that we don't have to understand a boundary to abide by it, to respect it, right? There are people that I don't like, but that doesn't give me the license to just like say whatever I want, right? That's a me problem. And so I think that her being put in a position where she's continually like, I think what I was seeing is that they were trying to be like, Ariana, we all need this financially, which fair, right? It's a job, but like you have to violate your boundaries for me. And that's not how boundaries work. And that is, and I give Ariana a lot of credit for steadfastly being like, nope. Even when the audience is screaming and people are hating her and people are like, oh, she's on her high horse. And it's like, nah, man, she's doing what a therapist would suggest that she does. I mean, I don't suggest people do things. That's not how I work, but you get my point. Yeah. She is doing what is best for her in real life and not for the show. And thus is the divide, because the fans of the show and the people who are making their income are like, well, come on. But it's like, nah, man, that's not her responsibility. If I lost my ability to do, like if Bravo blew up tomorrow, this is the analogy I used, I'd have to pivot career-wise, right? I'd have to figure it out. And I can't blame everybody else.
Spritz.
Hell yeah.
Company.
I'll be like, lover boy, are you looking for a therapist to, whatever. But so I definitely think that's one part of it. Now, the second part of it with Lala, here's what I wrote. Lala said, I deliver facts in unpretty packages. And here's what I said. Translation: I say whatever I want when I'm emotionally dysregulated, and I expect you to accept it as fact when it's not, when it's actually my personal feeling. So sometimes feelings are not facts. sometimes feelings are irrational, right? We all experience them. And just because we feel them or we believe them doesn't give us the right to steamroll other people. And Lala is just refusing to accept Ariana's boundaries, because let's face it, they've all just bought really expensive homes in the Valley. And I get it. I get that this is their job, but at the same time, I feel that Lala does weaponize motherhood. And Sheena does it too. And I will, this is a hill I will die on, in terms of like, you are right that Lala's situation is different from Ariana's for sure, because of everything you just said. But she acts like her living is more special or important than Katie or Ariana's because they don't have kids. And it's like, so my like financial situation doesn't matter because like I'm not a mom. Like that's just like a crappy thing to say, and it pissed off a lot of child-free people.
I think it pissed off a lot of moms.
Oh, and
I
that
saw
too.
so many moms being like, why would you? And this is, again, it's very different if you are a single parent who is like on minimum wage, like barely getting by,
right,
trying to raise some kids. Like that is a very difficult situation. And I would argue like more important than my ability to make a living for myself.
Yes.
And that is why we
yes.
have like assistance programs and things
Right.
like that, so that
Yep.
people can get like the nutrition they need and,
Mhm.
all of that. So I understand that. But she has 2 multi-million-dollar homes and she's acting about like providing for my kid. What do you mean? Like
Exactly.
what kind of level of
like sell a house then.
Yeah.
Sell your house.
Yeah.
Because you're exactly right. If you can't afford food and there's something called Maslow's pyramid of needs, okay? And the bottom of the pyramid is safety. So do you have shelter? Do you have food? Are you able to support yourself and your child and things like that? If your safety is at risk, then yes, that really matters. And like, it's vital. But to your point, Lala is a multimillionaire who could just sell a house. And it's like, it's a privileged, it's like whining from a place of privilege.
She's not going to get a lot of money on the house because she only put a little bit of equity into it, right?
Oh, gee, I wonder why.
Well, no, like they haven't owned it long. Like she hasn't owned her houses long enough for her to make like a lot of money off of it. I don't think. But in general, I just think it's unfair to weaponize that. And then for Sheena, who I think normally does not weaponize her motherhood, but did in this situation where she was like, I was not able to be present for my child because I was so upset. Then the situation is you need to figure out how to not be upset. It's not Ariana's job to fix it for you.
That's right. Ariana's not in charge of emotion regulation of all the cast members. It's like, are people blaming Ariana for pollution? For climate change? Like what else can we blame this woman for?
I know.
And I get it. I understand, I get where the vitriol comes from. I just think it's wild. And you're right. When I posted about this, a lot of moms came to my page and was like, I'm a mother and I was pissed. This is not cool. It's not acceptable. And I'm just grateful that people are seeing through it, because that is absolutely what she did. And I think it's wild.
The other thing I will say is that what Lala is accusing everyone of is not being as real as she is on camera. But she was the least real this reunion, especially when she brought up, oh, Ariana, you didn't defend me when Charlie said mean things about me. And Ariana's like, we had that conversation. She's like, well, it didn't air, so we're going to talk about it now. Well, just because it didn't air
doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Doesn't mean it didn't happen. So now you want to get the audience caught up on something that happened separately where Ariana acted perfectly.
Right.
Like I can literally can think of nothing wrong that she was like, wow, I totally should have stood up for you. I'm really sorry. That's like, so why are you like bringing that up now? It's very weird. And I don't think they realize the hypocrisy of being like, we have tough conversations on camera and it's our jobs. Well, yeah, Ariana did that. She did that last year. She had a really tough conversation with Sandoval. Right. And then why does she have to keep having it? That's not real. They're not talking in real life. So why would they talk on the show?
It's like, here's the thing. Sandoval made them all a lot of money. And I understand to go from that flow of it to thinking about the show potentially ending is probably terrifying. But guess what? That's not Ariana's problem. That's
No,
not
they
her
need to
problem.
get financial advisors, and I will die on this hill. These people are so bad with money, and they are asking all the wrong questions,
Oh
and
my
they are
God,
spending
yes.
it in the wrong ways, and they
Yep.
are investing it in the wrong ways or not investing at all. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you just put, like, when Ariana was like, "Oh, it was in my last $2,000," don't put it all into a business or into a home. Make sure you put something in the market. Make sure you have a
Right.
savings account. Make sure you, and for everyone listening, like, you don't need to be a millionaire to invest in the stock market. Like, you
1,000%.
just need a couple $100s to buy
Mm-hmm.
one share or two shares of a stock. And
Mm-hmm.
then you just let it be for years and years and years. And eventually
Right.
it will appreciate
Mm-hmm.
over time. Like, it may crash, but then it will build back up. And then you took that money, that couple $100s, and all of a sudden it's 10,000. And
Right. And
that's how people make money. And it's not the only way, but it's how
well,
you
of
take your
course.
money and make it grow exponentially. And I think a lot of people think that, like, real estate is the way, and it can be, but there's a lot more costs associated in real estate than there are
Mm-hmm.
in investing in the market. There's a lot more barriers, actually, I
Mm-hmm.
think. And I wish more
Yeah.
people were aware of just basic financial literacy, like,
Yes. It,
retirement, all, like, it's when Kristen in the Valley was like, it makes my vagina close. Girl, you should get
well,
wet from
then
money. You should, talking about finance
literally,
should literally, come on,
thank
come
you.
on.
Thank you. And here's the thing. So in therapy, my personal style with a holistic approach was financial literacy, because when our mental health is struggling, it's taking everything to survive. And so people often struggle financially, and financial
Mm-hmm.
health and wellness is such an important part of our lives that I do feel like gets ignored. Younger people today, there's not enough investing in your future, people not putting into retirement. We have to have good financial health. And like, we could have a whole episode on this. I think
I know.
there's,
And I think I want to
go ahead.
clarify that, especially for people who are making a lot of money, and that's what I'm talking about with them.
Oh, of course.
They're making a lot of money. If you are working at, like, a lower income job, and you're new and you're, like, barely getting by with rent, like, I'm not saying invest in the market, and, like, it goes back to just don't eat,
Yeah,
avocado toast and stop having Starbucks every day. Like, that's stupid. That's, like,
of
those are
course. Of
dumb,
course. Yeah.
but for people who are getting, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars
Yeah.
for being on TV, you need to start getting real smart. And I know people get excited about businesses, but that should
Mm-hmm.
be not the only thing that you fall on, because businesses frequently fail.
Oh my God. They're restaurant businesses, people have no idea how hard they are. And listen, and I will say, for people struggling socioeconomically, those were a lot of folks I worked with, and there are still ways for them not to invest, not what I mean, but like, everyone can have financial literacy and can
Yes.
grow their financial safety. And so I think that it seems like a misstep for all these Bravo Labs to be given these boatloads of money, and then they're just like, they're burning it in the wind,
It
and it's
feels like
like,
the
what?
NFL. Like, you're only going to be
Sincerely.
able to play
Yeah.
for, like, a couple years, and then all of a
Right.
sudden you're 28, 29, and they're like, ooh, getting up there in age. They're like, well, we don't know how long they're going to stay
I
healthy. And it's like,
know.
oh my God, just, don't be frivolous. But it's really hard when people are young, right? And when they
It
don't
is.
have the guidance and someone telling them. And a lot of people don't want to pay for a financial advisor.
Mm-hmm.
Some financial advisors are not great,
Oh,
right?
I
But, like,
know.
finding someone that you trust
Right.
who can help give you options that you then make the choice,
Right.
it kills me. And I can't believe that Sheena needed money during COVID. I can't, like,
I
that's not,
can't.
like, if you have
I,
so much coming in and you're literally spending it all, that is a huge, huge
huge red
problem.
flag.
If you
I
make a lot of
agree.
money, don't spend it all.
And I feel like that's what's wild about LA is people are just like robbing Peter to pay Paul to keep up appearances. And
Yeah.
on here, you and I, we're on the East Coast, and it's like, we don't play that here. I mean, some people do, because it is a human thing. But in this part of the country, it's like, I'm not I'm not doing that. I don't care. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
think being put in this space does lend itself to that. But one thing I want to make sure to talk about, because we got to move on to the Valley because our time
Yes.
is a ticking. The one thing I did want to talk about is when Allie talked about, I don't like James when he drinks. Something I talked about online that people appreciated, and I just wanted to talk about it here, was the difference between sobriety and dry. Okay.
Mm.
So James talked about being sober. Okay. And as you alluded to when we were talking about Carl, is that sobriety is a full journey of awareness, learning how to grow and change, figuring out fundamentally who we are. What are our character defects? How do I become the best person I can be? And being dry is simply abstaining from a substance. And so there's an important distinction here, because the other thing I like to talk about is California sober. That's not sober, but I'm not here to judge what people need to do to keep themselves alive, right? Like going to AA and 12-step programs are not where it's at for everybody. There is not a one size fits all approach. So I understand where people are coming from, but putting a substance in your body and still experiencing intoxication in some way is not sobriety. And I think that James, to me, his behaviors are very indicative of someone who's dry. And,
Mm-hmm.
Allie seemed to be, we knew about this incident, right? We knew about what happened where he got intoxicated. Allie had to leave for 2 nights with her 2 cats. And when she talked about it, she seemed really scared, but she didn't want to go into it because she loves James. And I don't think she wants to vilify him. But we have seen James time and time again have abusive behaviors on camera, truly, when intoxicated. And so I understand how she feels. And I think that her boundary of, if we are going to be together, you cannot drink. Bravo, bravo, bravo to Allie. Because guess what? She doesn't deserve the stuff that I'm sure comes out when James is drinking. And I'm grateful that she has the ability to stand tall and adjust her crown. I'm here
Me
for it.
too. I think it's great. Yeah, the sobriety stuff is so complicated because what works for one person, like you said, like I think I would consider Carl sober. Again, I have like no qualifications in this space, but I think like working a program and having a sponsor and having
Right.
that, he said that his sponsor knows when and how much,
Correct.
so that it is not like a daily thing with
Mm-hmm.
marijuana. And sometimes I think AA and NA can be like too restrictive, where they're like, you
Sure.
can't be
Sure.
on antidepressants, you can't
Ugh.
take
Don't even get me
medication.
started on that.
Like,
That's a hill I'll freaking die on, dude.
and I will die on the substance use disorder medication because
Yeah. Some
most
people,
people are not able to stop using opioids without
right.
medication. It's just
Right.
like statistically, all of the peer reviewed and what do you call it? What's like a review of all the reviews?
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah. No, it's okay. I'm forgetting the term for it
like,
too.
like it's like now proven that like the most success people have with staying off opioids is being on um like buprenorphine. I can't pronounce all of but
Mm-hmm.
being on medication. And I know that there's a big problem with NA not accepting that, and that most models for sobriety and going to rehab like also don't encourage that, which makes it much
They don't.
harder for it, which is why
Right.
people often like fail a lot,
Mm-hmm.
especially specifically with opioids. So
Right. And
so it's like and if, but again, you don't want to replace one substance for another too. And that
right.
seems like
Right.
what, at least the way that James talks about how much he smokes,
Right.
does feel to me like if he's waking up and the first thing he's doing is smoking marijuana, like that seems like a problem.
Yeah,
But again,
that's replacement. And to your
yeah.
point, here's the thing, because I worked in an inpatient residential treatment facility for drug and alcohol use. And so you're right, there are things that people can use, antabuse, and I'm blanking on some of the other terms for opiate replacements. So again, we're looking at a lot of complicated factors like socioeconomic status. A lot of people can't afford to go to rehab.
Yeah,
You
totally.
can't pay 40 grand to get sober.
Although if states would expand Medicaid, that would be the best way in order to get most people access to
yeah,
drug
yeah.
treatment.
Listen, I fight for that all the time. And facilities, they don't want to take it because they don't get paid a lot. So self-pay and saying, well, if you want to be here for 30 days, you got to fork over 30 grand or whatever. And in LA, it's even worse. So yes. And the one note you said that I do want to focus on is it's not so much about all of this. It's about, are you being honest with yourself and other people? So for example, Carl has a sponsor. He's people in his circle that he's honest with. He's not hiding behaviors. He's not hiding his use. He's being clear about it. So for me, that's just the function. What I'm more talking about is like sobriety. You live in a truth. Yeah. Where you're not hiding from yourself and others. And for those listening, addiction is a terrible disease. I have a lot of empathy. People know I'm like a huge support. And I will list some resources on my page to, help people get to the right spot. So shall we move to the Valley?
Well, there's a lot of substances we can talk about on the Valley.
Oh, so many substances. And this is another hill that I'm willing to die on, about Brittany and how Jax is literally painting a narrative that people online are happily running with. And I'm like, you are doing Jax's bidding. Can you please stop? I don't know how you feel about that, but that's how I feel about
the narrative that she has a drinking problem.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it's like not as black and white. I think from what we've seen, and I can only go off of what we've seen on the show, is that in season 6 or 7, I think 7, she was, and apparently this has been going on their entire relationship, where she drinks and she vomits a lot. And it doesn't always seem like she's super intoxicated when she's doing the vomiting. Like it's not like how most people vomit when they're drunk. Yeah. Right? Yeah. It's like she gets a little bit in her and it can like mess it up. And the doctor that she saw suspected that she had an ulcer and that it was very raw inside her stomach, and that to avoid, and he gave like entire lists of like types of foods, like citrus and spicy and any alcohol whatsoever. And she didn't want to listen. And I think it has been going on for a very long time that she just doesn't want to go back. This is I'm totally speaking like just from assumption, which could be, 100% wrong. She doesn't seem to want to get help for it because she knows that they're going to tell her that you have to stop eating and drinking the things that she wants to eat and drink. And so maybe, and I'm being very generous with Jax, he thinks, well, if you can't stop because even though a doctor is telling you to, then maybe there's a problem. I don't think she fits the traditional, like mold of someone, the criteria for actual addiction. Right. But the fact that she's doing something that is harming herself. And when she was like, I only had one shot, like that's the thing, is it's the one thing, like maybe she has Crohn's or colitis or like something in her stomach that does not allow her, that like alcohol messes with. And I bet you it's foods too. Like I want her, and I know it's like not the right time because she's like in such a bad place with her marriage, but like I want her to be so curious, like what is causing this and what can I do to stop it? Because I want to be there for myself. I want to be there for my kid. And she doesn't seem to like be taking the initiative. And even back on season 7, she didn't take the initiative. It was Jax kind of sort of dragging her to a GI specialist. Yeah. And I think because her whole life has been like this, she acts like it's kind of normal. And I want to blatantly say like that is not normal. Now, that does not excuse any of Jax's behavior and how he is going about this, how he's screaming at her, how he's abusive towards her, all of that. Like none of that is excused. I'm just saying that when we talk about like, she's not like a traditional, she doesn't meet the criteria for someone with a quote unquote drinking problem, but her inability to stop knowing that that's what's causing her stomach things is concerning.
Well, so I definitely appreciate that take for sure. And I definitely know that scene that you're referring to, because that, that's what a lot of people refer to. But here's my take on it. And I am someone who I have chronic cancer. I have chronic illnesses, right? So I know what it is for your body to just act a fool. and you're also trying to live your life. So this is why what I'm going to say, this is the hill I'm willing to die on, because as someone with chronic illness, and listen, perhaps I have to be honest, maybe I'm projecting some of my stuff onto her, right? I have empathy for it. But what I see is that her saying she had a gallbladder removed when she was a child. She's always had a weak stomach, which isn't a thing. She's clearly hasn't gotten the medical treatment that she needs and deserves.
Well, I would say it
for
is a
sure.
thing. It's called being Jewish.
Okay.
I don't know. We all tend to sort of like, it's a kind of a joke in the community. We all tend to sort of have like a little bit of like lactose intolerance. Like we have like almost everyone. Like I'm one of the few people that
That's
doesn't
funny.
like have a GI of my friends that are
Really?
Jewish.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
know. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay. So the Jewish community, the weak stomach, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
but we're also like we tend to like have clusters of like health problems due to our like inbreeding genetically.
Well, epigenetics, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
And
but
the
actual
generational
genetics.
right. Right. Right.
I'm joking. But yeah, no, I think, but I also think, and here's another theory. I have like a very, very good friend that was in a marriage that I did not realize she didn't want to be in. I didn't realize it. And she like developed all these like allergies, which was crazy. Like she couldn't eat sweet potatoes. She couldn't have broccoli. She couldn't eat eggs. And it was just like this list kept growing. And she was seeing doctors and they were telling her to avoid these foods. And then she left the guy.
Yep.
And now she only has like one of the allergies.
Right. So this was the point that I was getting to is that there is a book that I talk about probably on every podcast. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. And as someone with chronic illness, what I can tell you is that the chronic illness is real, but things like stress, turmoil make it 1,000% worse. I think that Brittany has chronic health conditions that she admittedly isn't addressing. Like she said in the last episode, I don't know the words that she used, but she's like, I'm not treating myself the way that I need to treat my body. She is ignoring issues. She isn't getting proper medical treatment. However, I fully believe that Brittany is experiencing all these things and self-neglecting because she is too focused on trying to keep her relationship with Jax afloat and her son having more developmental needs than anticipated. And of course, Jax, she deals with 2 kids, right? Because he can't handle it. And so my point is that with living with my health conditions, I'm going to use an example. Okay. If I eat certain things, my body literally revolts. It gets so angry. I'm going to use the example of donuts. Okay. My stomach loves a donut. My body hates it. I lose my mind. But does that mean that I should never have a donut again? Like, I guess what I'm saying is that when you're living with a chronic illness, people are so quick to blame for, well, how dare you? And it's like, okay, so when I go out to eat, I eat healthy at home. But when I go to restaurants, it does tend not to sit well with me because it's more processed, more this, more that. Does that mean I should never go out to eat again? So these are the things that I want to be like an advocate for folks with like chronic health issues in that we always get blamed for our shit. Always. Now, if I do that and I suffer consequences, those consequences are only mine and I have nobody to blame. And I have to own that, okay, I'm making a calculated decision and now this is what's going to happen and I have to deal with that. So I also think there's a part of this that Brittany is really struggling because she has 2 children and she's filming, right? And so what do you do when you're filming? What do they all do? So it's like, I do think there's a part of this that people are missing because they're so quick to jump on Jax's bandwagon, which is wild. I know no one's agreeing with his behaviors, but I guess I just wanted to share that point from someone who struggled with this my whole life to say, well, if you had something like this going on, would you never drink again? Like ever? I mean, I don't drink because I don't like it. I grew up with alcoholism and there's just a million reasons. But at the same time, like my doctors this is the last thing I'll say about it. So I have a specialty team at Penn Medicine because I am a medical unicorn and I require a very smart team of people, which is so weird. And, I talked to him about my diet and not feeling well and feeling fatigued. That's my number one symptom. And he said to me, I was talking about my healthy diet, and he said, Melissa, listen. He said, yes, you're living with CLL and yes, you're managing this, but sometimes you got to have a margarita and a cheeseburger. And, it's not a popular thing to say as a physician, but his point being that we have to find a way to live our lives and enjoy ourselves and be social and also take care of ourselves. Now, Brittany is not doing that second part of taking care of herself. But if Jax was really concerned, he would sit down with her. And you know what I'm saying? It's like his behaviors, and I rarely say this boldly, as bluntly as this, his behaviors are abusive. Flat out, without question, his behaviors are abusive. And in my opinion, it's more about maintaining power and control. And that's what I really don't like, right? When he's in the kitchen and he's shit talking her to her friends, that is meant for power, control, and to regain the narrative. And that behavior is extremely concerning to me. It's not about Brittany throwing up, in my opinion. I don't even think he really cares. I don't think he knows how to love anybody. I don't know that he knows how to really care about anybody, including himself. And I think that he's using this as a convenient excuse to try to be right. And I refuse to allow that. So I might be wrong,
No.
but
I also haven't been paying attention to what people were saying about her or him in this episode, like at all. So I don't know what like the consensus is. I also feel like social media tends to not be a great barometer of the consensus because it's like the extreme people that are on like the super fans that are on social media.
Right.
Most of my friends that watch the shows aren't like super active on social media with regards to the Bravo shows. And so that's why when you get someone like Paul Scheer on and he says that he's Team Carl instead of Team Lindsay and that he thinks like he's all for Lala, like that's not as popular. But that means to me that he's just not following the narrative of what the kind of masses on social media are saying. And that's what I like. I'm like, I want to know what you think without everyone else's opinions influencing you. So I hear you on the chronic, and I think chronic illness, and I think that you make a lot of really good points. I just feel like if I was in a marriage, and this is very different, like with someone who for 9 years, not every time, but most of the time that they drink, they like spend a lot of time vomiting. Like that's also so gross to me, like to have to share a bathroom with someone that's like vomiting, like and that it seems self-inflicted. Well, like, I can't handle it. Like, fix it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, yes, I agree. And to that point, if I went out every weekend and had donuts and was sick and like couldn't do things, and my husband and I now don't have a social life because I'm continually making those decisions, well, that's on me,
Yeah.
So you're right. Somewhere in the middle is the accurate, what's really happening. So let's, being mindful of our time. One thing I did want to say is that Jason, really Jason and Jesse, they had some insights that were amazingly on point. And especially, here's the thing with Jesse. I'm telling you, I have not been so fascinated by someone maybe ever on Bravo. Here's why. He has a huge ego. He does seem to have some personality issues, but he has such good insight. And I'm like, how? Those things clinically don't usually go together. So I'm like desperate to know more about that. But what Jason said was, Jax isn't being honest with us or with himself. Maybe in the 50s, that's how people used to approach their marriages. And as a result, our parents were messed up. Someone needs to break the cycle. And so what he's talking about is the whole, well, we don't believe in divorce.
Yeah.
Well, that's power and control. That's not like our parents, the marriages were for survival. Women went from parents' house to their, partner's house, but I'll say husband because it also wasn't acceptable to be gay, even though people were, but you get my point.
Yeah.
You went from your parents' house to being, in this like heteronormative relationship where the man works and you stay home. And it's just like, there's just this there's a sociological shift. People, irrespective of gender, are wanting healthy, supportive, loving relationships. And Jason is right that, and obviously this is one of the reasons why they're separated. And in my opinion, I don't see how they could ever get back together. Do you?
No, I don't see that either. What's so interesting about Jesse though is that he can say something that has a lot of wisdom, and then his instincts are so so horrific and
So
terrible.
bad.
Like how he will talk to women, like when Janet came and he's like, get out of here, like screaming at her. Like that, the fact that that was so easy for him to do tells me that like he has like a behavioral problem that was just like
Right.
never corrected as a child
Sure.
or something. Like to get away with that and to speak to people like that and then be forgiven is, you can't keep doing that. The other thing I thought was so fascinating is like, this show seems to be about grappling with modern day partnerships. And what does
Yes.
that mean? And when Danny was crying about, and I believe that it's like full on because he hasn't been sleeping.
Yeah.
You
Sleep
know, like
deprivation. Sure.
I know it really triggered a lot of mothers who breastfeed, and I feel for them.
Yes.
Like like what you are feeling is 100% valid.
Right.
I think what he was trying to say was, I'm so exhausted, and he didn't even really get a chance to
Right.
explain what, because they said, well, do you think Nia appreciates you? He didn't get a chance to answer that. Jesse
Right.
stepped in and was like, they never do. He said, but they never do. And then Danny's just like, yeah, like I don't know that
Yeah.
he believes that. And I just think when people are in that newborn phase and it's like a constant, like you're just not getting REM sleep and
Yep.
you're barely functioning, that like there just needs to be a lot of grace given to everyone. It is much harder on the like woman who is breastfeeding because it's like the whole body
Well, of
and
course.
all of your hormones, but
Yeah.
I don't want to discount the impact that it has on him too. And
Right.
I think, and then he said, you know, it's a different time. I literally wrote it down. You know what I mean? Women just expect different things. And he said, and then Jack said, I'm going through the same thing,
Oh
basically.
my
And it's like,
God. I
you're not
can't.
going through the same thing. It's like,
Yeah, bro.
and I
Mm-mm.
think this is something that's very different that I've noticed, like even in my family, like my dad was like, yeah, I wasn't up when like you were being fed. Like
Right.
like mom made sure that I got a full night's sleep so that I could go to work,
Right.
you know? And and he's like, and so I would take care of you when you were sick. I would help out at certain times. You know, my mom had very bad postpartum that I did not find out about until
No.
after her death. And my dad's like, oh yeah, those first few months I did everything. I was like,
No.
oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Interesting.
listen, to your point,
Yeah.
men are impacted. And like you said,
Yeah.
the sleep deprivation piece is what I think people minimize the impact that has on mental health. Sleep deprivation is one of the most awful things that will just collapse health and mental health, period. And not only do they have two, they have a young son. And so, of course, Nia is physically, I mean, women, they give everything, their mind, body, souls,
Yeah.
everything. But it is also fair to say that he's impacted. And I think that it's fair that he's impacted, but of course, Jesse and Jax do what they do best, which is hijack the conversation and make it
Yeah.
about them and um try to justify like their crappy behavior by being like, yeah, me too, bro. And it's like, nah, man, this isn't the same
Yeah.
thing.
I wish they had been like, oh, what are some ways we could be helpful? What if we dropped off food once a week? What if we, do you know what I
Right?
mean? Like, that's what, when I am dealing with friends who are in that period of like the breastfeeding, like every couple hours, like, I'm
Right.
just like, I'm just going to show up with groceries.
Right.
Let me know, or here's the store I'm going to, send me a
Right.
list.
Right.
You know, most of the time, you know, they can't even put together a list, but it's like, do you need toilet paper? Do you need
Right.
toothpaste? Like just some of the
Yeah.
basics. And I feel like they all feel like they're drowning, but only one of those couples is truly like unable to function due to lack of sleep. And I would argue also Janet at some point, because once you're really pregnant, some people can't sleep. once they're super
and
pregnant.
her emotional reaction
Yeah.
was so understandable, because here she is like cooking and on her feet, and she's not getting help, and the boys are out lamenting. But here, the one of the things I also really want to say is justice for Jason, because I think he really got the shaft on this trip. Like, he's trying to attend to his wife, he's trying to attend to his friends, and no one's attending to him. And he said, he's like, geez, I thought this baby moon was supposed to be X, Y, and Z. And it's like, this is why a baby moon is meant for one thing, but this was meant to tape a show. And that's not really a true baby moon,
Yeah. I feel bad that he's in that position. I also feel like people have been really tough on Janet. I know a lot of people really don't like her, and she rubs a lot of people the wrong way. Part of me also wonders, like, and I know you can't like completely change personalities when pregnant, but I'm thinking of Lala and noticing how a lot of her behavior has changed while pregnant. And I'm not trying to make an excuse for it, but I do wonder how much like her body's going through that's kind of making her act like an asshole. And right, like I don't know, like maybe it's not her fault. And with Janet, just the amount of like stress that she's talked about, how Kristen, some of the stuff that she was talking about was like so stressful for Janet that she was having a physical reaction, like the infant, like the unborn baby was having a reaction, and she started going into like early labor or something, and they told her to try to keep a calm environment. And so that is what she says that's why she cut off Kristen. And not just a show. So she's like, this was because like of my interpretation of what my doctor was telling me. And I didn't want Zach to be there, because then Zach like brings Kristen along all the time. That being said, it was so hilarious when Zach was like, oh yeah, I just like posted that Instagram story, making it seem like I was in Big Bear, because he's trolling. And I wish she knows he's trolling, but she's like, also like her hormones are probably all over the place.
Yeah. And
you
she's
know what
tired.
I mean?
Yeah.
And she's tired. Like, I just try and give people so much grace on the show. Where I have a problem with is like Jax berating his wife, and then Jesse just screaming at women before. That's like his first instinct is to yell. Literally, and that is such a problem.
Your assessment is so right. It seems like his prefrontal cortexes that control impulses just like didn't form properly. It's like,
sorry.
Like, what has happened and guess what? Jesse is lucky that he hasn't come across Yabish, because if he ever talked to me like that, he won't be talking to me like that again. I promise you that. So it is wild. And, Mandy, listen.
I would cry. I would be exactly like Janet. I would just go in a corner and cry.
Oh, no. You literally, like, here's the irony. I am very, like, chill, but if you're gonna talk to me wild like that, you're gonna get the horns, and they're real sharp. So, but
I think it'd be different if it was like a work situation versus like a personal situation.
Yeah.
At work, I like command respect and attention. And my personal life, I'm just like way more, I just don't experience, I don't know, a lot of.
Well, you're chill, you're relaxed, and listen,
I'm pretty relaxed.
I love that you give people grace. I give people grace too. I think that this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you all for hanging in there with us. And Mandy, you're just gonna have to be a permanent guest. You're just gonna have to continue to come on. Yes, the news correspondent. So, Mandy, I want to give you the chance to please plug, promote what you've got going on.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Melissa. Just props to you for putting this whole platform together, for taking, what we all watch and actually giving clinical interpretations of what things mean, different phrases I've never heard before. Like the king baby thing that you posted about on Instagram. I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's what I saw. So props to you for building this. Thank you. I have a podcast about Bravo called Is This Real Life with Mandy Slutsker. It's the kinds of conversations that Melissa and I had today, just kind of dissecting people's behavior, personality, relating it to our own experiences in our own lives. I try to give a little bit of grace to people on TV and, try and see things from multiple angles.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know, it's supposed to be fun. Summer should be fun. Well, I think Bravo podcasting should be fun.
Right.
I don't
agree.
want to take it too seriously. Like, I reserve the right to completely change my mind. I reserve the right to be 100% wrong regularly.
Yes.
It's just a show that we're these shows that we're watching and we're commenting on, and that's what I find enjoyable out of all of it. So if you're into like a just for fun kind of a podcast that's a little bit cerebral, come join me, because I'm a little bit of a nerd.
No, but that's why I love you. And honestly, anyone listening to this, if you haven't listened to her podcast, if you like this, you'll like it, because you and I are very similar. We do tend to be a little bit more cerebral, but also, funny, and, have a nice moderate opinion, and we're not like trying to tear each other apart over like, it's not that serious. So please listen, because she's great.
And every once in a while, I do have an extreme opinion, and it's usually on like very odd things where I'm like, no.
You're also human. So you're human, and you're welcome to that. Because I love when people like post like a bad review or something about one thing you said like 10 years ago. And it's like, well, I've grown and I've changed my mind. And, like, we're human, right? We're fallible. We're not always right. And sometimes we change our opinions. So, it happens.
I think someone on her review said she uses terms like she and her, and I don't know who she's talking about. I was like, that is actually the most fair criticism. Like, I should regularly restate the name of who I'm talking about. So thank you to whoever wrote that. Like, it was like a 2 or 3 star review, and I was like, solid.
Fair. Listen, if we got fair feedback, like, that's more than fair. And now I'm like thinking back to, I'm like, oh God, we probably did that 100 times, but okay, I'm gonna work on that. So again, thank you so much.
We do our best.
We do our best. Mandy will be back, so don't fear. Thank you everyone for listening. So please check her out. Yes.
And you can follow me on social media. I literally always forget, because I am trying not to make social media a huge, big thing in my life. However, I am on it, and I really like to engage with people who listen to the podcast. So you can reach me at Mandy Slutsker. And if you aren't sure how to spell that, literally just spell Mandy with a Y, like Mandy Moore, Mandy Slut. Because Slutsker is spelled slut, Sker. It's my claim to fame. It was my nickname in college. My best friend still has me saved in her phone as Mandy Slut, because there were 2 Mandys in our friend group. And every time her phone lights up, like, people are like, who the hell are you talking to?
I'm dying.
And then she has like my dad's phone saved as like Papa Slut, and my brother is like Ben Slut. It was like a whole thing. So, yes, you can just type in Mandy Slut. I promise I will come up. It's a lot easier to remember than Slutsker.
Yeah, and I'm dead. Oh my God. Well, you're my favorite slut ever. I adore you. I can't wait for you to come back. Thank you everybody for listening. It just hit me. Thank you everybody for listening. Please check me out, Your Bitch Therapist, on Instagram. In addition to Mandy, please give the podcast a 5-star review. And if you have feedback, just let me know. Please DM me. Looking forward to next week's episode. I am going to be interviewing Ann Maddox, Tom's oldest sister.
Oh my God. I have so many things like for you to say to her for me.
Okay, well,
you know everything about her improv comedy career.
Okay, I will definitely ask her about that for sure. But I'm super excited. I'm having her and her partner, Amanda, on, her podcast partner, who she worked with Files. So
yes.
So I'm having them on. And so this episode will air Tuesday, and then that episode will air next week. So I hope everybody enjoys it. So thank you all for listening. Ta-ta for now. Can't wait to see you all next week. Disclaimer: posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Bitch Therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and my posts are my own and not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Great Heart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, or hear on YBT podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.